This is Kathy from Gadgets Top 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel. I'll be doing a writing sample on 52 GSM Tomoe River paper. Then I'll take a look at a writing sample that I did previously on 20-pound copy paper. I'll compare Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel to similar inks from my collection. And finally, I'll take a look at the results of my water resistance test. Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel felt pleasant when writing with it in a glass nib dip pen. The ink swatch that I made with tweezers was nice and crisp, but there's not much of a range in shade from the dark end to the lighter end, so I'm not predicting that I'll see much shading, but the drip at the end of the swatch has a nice dark magenta color, and I'm seeing that in the scribble that I made and the writing that I did with the dip nib. It looks more magenta at the beginning, and by the end it's looking a little more pink. So I'm curious how that's going to show up in the writing. I'm going to begin with a Pilot 78G. It has a stainless steel extra fine nib. This ink pairs very nicely with this extra fine nib. If I compare this to writing with other inks in this extra fine nib, it's nice and smooth. The brightness of this ink and the lubrication, since this is an eel ink, allows me to write with a lighter touch, and that allows this very fine, extra fine nib to write this smoothly. Next, I'll be writing with my Lamy CP1. It has a stainless steel extra fine nib. You can see that this Lamy Extra Fine writes much broader than the Pilot Extra Fine. I'm really liking this ink in this nib size. On this paper, it's very smooth. And I really like this magenta color paired with this black pen. I think this CP1 is going to be the pen that I do my long-term testing of this ink with. Next, I've got my Sailor LaCool. It's difficult to see with the naked eye, but you can see here the stamping is kind of shallow and faint, but this is a medium fine nib. A little bit of a hard start there. You can see that this medium fine is also finer than the Lamy Extra Fine. If this extra fine is too broad of a line for you, this medium fine is a nice compromise. And let me see, I wouldn't call it smooth, but it is very nice. Next, I've got a Kaweco Perkeo. It has a medium stainless steel nib. This is just nice and silky smooth, very pleasant to write with. Next, I've got my Pilot Pluminix. It has a stainless steel calligraphy medium. This just glided across the page. It's nice and smooth. Next, I'll be writing with my Kaweco Lilliput. It has a stainless steel broad nib. Very smooth. And finally, I've got a Jinhao X750. It has a stainless steel 1.5 stub nib. And that's very smooth also. Just feels very luxurious to write with this broader nib. Okay, while that dries, I'll take a look at the copy paper. This ink, I guess because it's so lubricated, tends to spread a bit, and it's not so much feathering as the letters just look ragged and feel a little sloppy. You can kind of see it here on the CP1. It's a wetter writer. So my favorite pens to write with were the drier pens like the Pluminix and the LeCool. The Pilot 78G Extra Fine, it was nice, but the LeCool was just enough broader that it was just very pleasant to write with. And the Pluminix, if you wanted a broader line, it was also very pleasant to write with. And it was dry enough that you don't get that ragged line. And as far as the bleed through goes, the wetter nibs tended to come through the page, but those drier nibs like the Pluminix and the LeCool did really good about not coming too far through the page. Now, when I did a writing sample on Rhodia paper, my favorites were flip-flopped. I wasn't real fond of the Sailor LeCool and the Pilot Pluminix. They felt a little dry, and the wetter nibs were very pleasant on Rhodia. When I first started writing with this ink, the first two inks that I thought of were Yamabudo and Roaring Clinger's Sulfurino. And when I compared them, Yamabudo it's somewhat similar, but it's got a little more shading. You can see it goes a little bit darker, and Yamabudo has sheen, whereas Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel does not. And I found in the Noodler's inks that I've tried, I don't think I've tried one that has any sheen. Noodler's inks tend to have nice shading. Certain ones do, but I don't think I've come across one with a lot of sheen. Now, I also thought of Sulfurino, but it's a little more purple. It really makes Cactus Fruit Eel look pink. I was surprised at how close Black Swan and Australian Roses was. It looks a little more red though, and it makes Cactus Fruit Eel look more pink. And also Sailor Manyo Akebi is a similar color, but it's a little more dusky. If you prefer something not quite as bright, Sailor Akebi is a good option. I was curious about this ink. Noodler's is known for their inks that have really good water resistance, or at least a water resistant component, but Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel is not water resistant. Okay, on the 52 GSM Tomoe River paper, in the heavier spots, the ink did get pretty deep into the paper, and you do have a decent amount of show through, but this is a pretty bold ink, so that is to be expected. There's not much shading visible in this ink until you get to the broader nibs. I'm seeing some beautiful shading here in the stub nib. Now in the drier nibs like the Pluminix and the LeCool, it looks pretty flat, and even in my Lamy CP1 that was a little bit wetter, it looks pretty flat, but I'm seeing a little bit of shading here in the Perceo. So even though there's not a lot of difference in the range of colors you see in this ink does have quite a bit of character. Okay, I'm going to be using this ink in my CP1. That's the one that just really stands out to me. So I'll put some ink in a converter and start using it. So that pen and ink combination will probably show up in a currently inked video in the near future. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.